Welcome to Monologues by Hassie, where I'm going to be dropping unsolicited brain dumps from the depths of my grey matter. I'll talk about life, money, society, and self-development, plus whatever else lies up there, whilst hopefully not getting cancelled in the process. This episode is a reminder to young men that the victim mindset does not serve you, and it is your role to be 100% accountable. And this is going to seem like a very tough thing to do in our modern environment, because in the modern world, especially the Western world, we have something called the gender wars, and a lot of people play the games of the gender wars. 10 years ago, when I was younger, probably much closer to your age, in my late teens and my early 20s, I definitely felt prey to not only the victim mindset, but also the gender wars. And I realize now, many years later, that this is one of the stupidest things that we as Western society allow to be entertained. Because the idea that men and women can be these independent beings is incredibly stupid. As a man, I know that I am not a strong, independent man. Why? Because I rely on the contributions of the society around me. And that may be everyone from the garbage man who comes to pick up my trash, to the doctor, the dentist, to the stewardess who serves me on the plane and looks after my safety should there be an incident. I exist in a world where I need to be interdependent on many other people, regardless of their gender, regardless of their demographic. So you will never hear me say that I am a strong, independent man, because I realize I do not live in that world. I do not live in a fantasy world where I am this independent being, that I can live without the existence of not just other humans, but other creatures on this planet. We are incredibly interdependent, both as individuals and as a society, as a species. We are interdependent on so many other factors and variables. And as a young man, you will be bombarded in today's society with messages that no matter what you do, you are the problem. If you go out to work today and you are driven to be economically successful, and you go and make money, and you work overtime, and you work the side hustle, you will be seen as a problem. Why? Because we live in a society that is trying to drive the idea of equality of outcome, but for a la carte, for a selected criteria which is favorable, such as money earned, such as money invested. So if you make good decisions in certain domains of your life, and I'm not saying they're good decisions for your entire life, but if you make good economic decisions, then this is going to be seen as a negative thing if too many young men do it. Because then they will say, we have this gender earnings gap. Men are earning too much. They are working too many hours. They are gravitating towards higher paying careers. And this is not a good thing. And you will hear messaging like this. In fact, in response to a report on gender inequality in Australia, which came out a few months ago, I remember seeing a LinkedIn thread. And the LinkedIn thread was from a prominent member of a certain industry who I won't name. But they were hypothesizing how they could encourage men to take jobs as assistants at lower pay and obviously lower status job titles, right? Assistants or PMs, roles that you typically don't see men in. And that's not to say that they're bad roles, but the whole idea, the whole premise of this argument was, how do you encourage men to do that? And let's say we could make that happen. Let's say we go ahead with that proposal and we encourage men to take lower paying jobs. Here's the problem. The reason a lot of men are driven to be economically ruthless, and I see this in a lot of my male friends, not all of them, but I see this in a lot of them, is because men only have value as men in our society when we contribute something to society, to women, and to children. Outside of that context, men do not have status in society. Your status is driven by what you can produce for others. And often the way we measure this in a very poor way. And of course, the value you produce for others is not exclusively going to be represented by money, but money is the way that we represent this contribution. Now, that's not to say all contributions are represented by money, nor should they be represented by money. But the reason that men are driven to chase that particular metric, why they game contributions which result in money, is because that is a very easy way for men to rank each other, to compare, to see where they fall in the hierarchy of society and attract women. You have to, I think men and women forget that the reason men go and become workaholics, go and do stupid things when it comes to how they work and how they produce, is driven by the fact that a lot of men aren't aware of this. And I think it would actually be a good thing if a lot of men became aware of why they are deciding to work a 70-hour week, why they are deciding to go down the career path of becoming an investment banker or going and becoming a doctor or doing something like offshore rigging, is because it comes with money, comes with status, it comes with you are contributing to society. And that paycheck you get allows you, in the most basic sense, to get sexual access. And that may sound very crude, but that is a very hard reality that both men and women forget. And so in that hypothetical scenario, if we could encourage men to take lower paid jobs at lower pay status, you then create a problem where the reason men are driven to do this is because that is specifically what attracts women. And when I speak to friends and family who are women, who are successful, who have great careers, and I ask them what they want in a partner, the answer will initially be an equal, and then you drill into that. And you say, okay, so how much is he earning? And then it will inevitably come down to, oh, he has to earn, at the very least, he has to make what I'm making. But ideally, he's making more. So even these successful women, if you had this society now where men, you've kind of somehow pushed them into the subclass, you've discouraged them from making too much money because, oh wow, that skews our metrics and that makes the gender wealth gap look really, really horrible, right? If men go make too much money and they squirrel away too much money. If you create a society where you have somehow flipped that situation, turned it around, you still need to deal with the fundamental reality that we have evolved as humans, that women are attracted to men who can produce and accumulate certain resources. And so how do you overcome your ideological stance that as an aggregate society, we need to have at the very least 50% of wealth and income in the hands of women and 50% in the hands of men? And how do you deal with the fact that you are going to create a society where there are not going to be enough suitable men for the women? And that is actually a very real problem, because at the same time as you hear a lot of complaints, and a lot of young men will be inundated with complaints that because older men than you, because historically men have gone and made more, and because historically, yes, there have been injustices against women and there have been unequal pay rates, you are going to be penalized today. You, somebody who wasn't even born in that time when that happened, right? Equality of outcome is going to be forced on you, not opportunity. Equality of outcome is going to be forced on you. But then you see the opposite side of that article saying that there are not enough university qualified men, there are not enough men who make enough for these high earning women. And you realize we are causing the destruction of our societal fabric, because at the same time as I see in my circles men who are hyper driven to go and achieve, I also see the counterpoint to this. Men who did not get off to the right start and honestly have just given up. They're basically just subsisting. They are doing the bare minimum. Why? Because the juice isn't worth the squeeze. And they are trying to rationalize that existence. And it's not inherently a bad thing, but it is a very, very depressing thing to witness. And deep down, I don't think these people are happy, because the world is a changing place, and women had their big change. They had the cultural changes where women have evolved, and I don't think men have gone through that cultural change yet. And we need to realize that we are creating a society where men are to blame if we succeed, and men are also to blame if we fail. And if you're a young man and you're inundated by these messages in the media, then what you need to do is take 100% accountability. And you may need to work outside of the traditional frameworks. I remember when I was a university student in my very final year, or very close to my final year, I was told by a lecturer, hey, you should consider applying for a PhD scholarship. You're a very smart person, and we think this would be a good pathway for you to pursue. Now, I was never interested in doing a PhD, but I remember looking at the pamphlet. They handed out a pamphlet, and there was a certain stipend for PhD students, and there was a default stipend if you were a female PhD student, where on top of the existing stipend, regardless, for simply being a woman, you were handed more money. In my head, I said, why would I do exactly the same thing for less? And the difference is, rather than actually going and doing a PhD and being bitter and complaining about that for 3 or 4 years, I never entertained that opportunity because I clearly realized that it's not in my favor. And so, as a man, when you take 100% accountability, you need to look at the incentives that society is giving you. Is it worth doing? And sometimes it is not going to be worth doing in the traditional way. You are going to have to find ways around a system that is trying to force, as an aggregate, equality of outcome. And that is a very, very tough thing to deal with. You may actually need to put in more work into a society which is trying to force some very, very nice numbers in a report that they're going to publish in 10 years and say, hey, look, we were successful at driving this ideological change in society. Now, I actually think, deep down, that this is a detrimental society. Why? Because we should live in a society where different people are allowed to make different choices and, as a result, have different outcomes. The idea that we need to be forced into some ideological homogeny where everyone is the same, that we all make the same, that it doesn't actually work. It doesn't actually work, and it's not working because we have so many societal problems. And a lot of the problems that people are complaining, I saw another one recently, it's like man versus bear. Now, obviously, this is in relation to domestic violence, but guess what happens when you have more disenfranchised men, when you have more men who are economically disenfranchised, when you have more men who are simply low-life deadbeats because they don't give a shit. They look at society and they say, we don't care, this is not a game that's worth playing. We are renters. We can't afford to buy houses. Therefore, we haven't cultivated a sense of citizenship. Guess what? While you guys are arguing about how to make everything 50-50, arguing about what pronouns to use, there are barbarians waiting at the gates of Western civilization, waiting to tear it down. And we are arguing about all this innate, stupid bullshit. And it is awful. And if you create more and more disenfranchised men, guess what? You are going to have more of these problems where there are going to be men who do, unfortunately, turn on other men, women, and children. And it is only going to increase. And here's the irony. Even though this is happening in Western civilization, what we have is inherently better than what you have in other parts of the world. And I can say this because I'm traveling the world. A lot of people would kill to have the crime statistics, to have the incomes, to have the freedoms, the opportunities that we have in the West. Now, that's not to say every part of the West has this, because as I said, many parts of the Western world are crumbling. You can look at places like San Francisco, where you have stupid laws, where you have stupid crime, where people can't even defend their own stores if you have break-ins. And there are obviously parts of the West which are in clear decay, but as a whole, we are incredibly lucky, and we are contributing to the preconditions that are going to make many, many things worse in the future. And this isn't going to be a very popular message. I do realize this is a message where I am saying that it's not that I think that the goals of a lot of these policies are bad, but we need to look at what incentive structures are they creating. Are we going about doing things the right way? Equality of opportunity is a wonderful thing. If we can create a society where you can have mobility, that is a wonderful thing. But forcing equality of outcome is going to be incredibly detrimental. And as young men, you are going to be bombarded, as I said before, with messages that no matter what you do, if you decide to succeed, you are going to be a problem. If you decide to fail, if you decide to rebel, you are also going to be a problem. And here's my ask to you. If you have, as a young man, come across this message, then what I ask you to do is hang in there. Because there is a saying, hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men. Weak men create hard times. And I believe we are living in the day and age where the weak men are creating hard times. So if you are listening to this message, I implore you, do not give up. You will once again come to be valued in society for your contributions. Because imagine if we made men disappear from this world. Imagine if we made your contributions disappear from this world. We would not live in a better world. And as I always say, we are interdependent creatures. I depend on many other people. I depend on many men. I depend on many women. It doesn't matter whether somebody is coming to collect my garbage, whether somebody is drilling oil in an offshore oil rig, whether there is a nurse helping me when I am in hospital, whether there is an air stewardess looking after my safety if there is an incident on a plane. I live in a world where I rely on many other people, men and women. So you will never hear me come out there and say I am a strong, independent man. I can be a strong man, but I'm a strong, interdependent man, because I realize that there are contributions that other people make. And there is a very, very vocal voice in today's Western society that is telling men that you are not needed, that is telling you that you are a problem no matter what you do. And I think this is so stupid because these people are living in a bubble. They are not exposed to the realities, to how people have to live in certain other societies, the freedoms that they lack, and they are actually creating the preconditions for the destruction of the very freedoms that they use and abuse today. And so if you are a young man listening to this, I implore you to hang in there, even if it is difficult, even if your access to opportunities is cut. My advice to you, if I could speak to my 20-year-old self, my advice would be try to learn a valuable skill. Cultivate your physicality. Cultivate your physical strength. This is something I found too late in life. Learn to do something like meditation. It is important that you cultivate a medium where you can handle your emotions, you can handle your anger, your frustration, your sadness in a productive manner. Why? Because male anger will often be viewed as threatening. If you can learn to deal with your psychology in a way that is non-threatening to others and in a way that will help yourself develop, that is a positive thing. And then my fourth point, outside of a high-value skill of physicality, learning to control your emotions using something like meditation, is learn how to invest. Start pooling the resources so you can create optionality in your life. Learn how to invest. And the reason I say this is because you may find yourself in a predicament where, because you are not the correct demographic, you don't tick the correct affirmative action boxes, you may not have the appropriate opportunities to go forward, or you may be blocked from these things. In that event, having your own investments will allow you to take on more risk. And guess what? They will complain about this as well. When you decide to create optionality for yourself and maybe exit traditional routes, people will complain. But you are far better off being 100% accountable for your future, for your path, and letting people complain than you are by playing by the rules of a very, very stupid, in my opinion, gender war. So stupid. Because I know as a man, I need women, and because I want to have a family in the future. And I hope that whoever I partner up with also realizes that men have an important value in her life as well. And so I want to be in a relationship where there's interdependence. And I also want you to cultivate a sense of empathy to those who do not know what they are doing, or even those who are intentionally being very short-sighted with the decisions they make, with the messages they put out, by encouraging this continued hatred between men and women. I think it is such an unhealthy thing. It is, in my opinion, a very, very, very clear sign of the decay of Western society, and I think it is going to make things worse. Even the problems that women are complaining about, such as the whole man versus bear, domestic violence. As I said, it is only going to increase as we have larger amounts of disenfranchised men who do not have a sense of civic ownership in their society. So if you're listening to this, I'm asking you not to go down that dark path. I am asking you to be a good person, even in the face of a media, of very, very vocal segments of our society who seem to view you as the problem to every problem that they have in their lives. And so with that, I end this episode. And I wish all of you listening to this, not just the young men, but anyone who's listened to this, great success on all your endeavors. You've just made it through another episode of Monologues by Hassie. It brings me great pleasure to know that you made it to the end. To listen to more episodes, subscribe on your favorite podcast app or visit monologuesbyhassie.com. Thanks for swinging by.